All right, so let's take a look. Now that we've got a little bit of a feel of what you're looking at and how some of this stuff works, let's just actually start doing some things. Now, in the toolbar down the left-hand side over here, you're going to see two different arrows. We're going to talk about this in great detail in a little bit, but I just want to point out this too. If you hover over any of these tools, you will notice it tells you what those tools are. So the very first tool that we have is the selection tool. Also notice that it's showing us right there, selection tool V or escape. That tells us if you want that tool, the keyboard shortcut for it is V on the keyboard. The next arrow looks exactly like the other one, but it's white instead of black. The direct selection tool, and that's also letter A on the keyboard. So V for selection tool and A for the direct selection tool. These two tools are going to be kind of tricky, but yet very much different. You're going to go, oh my gosh, they do the same exact thing. Well, they do the exact same thing, but the direct selection tool is going to allow us to do stuff that the selection tool doesn't, and I'm going to explain that after we start building some things. We have a bunch of other tools here. We have the page tool, the gap tool, the content collector tool, the type tool, which is going to be very important in all the stuff that we're going to do. Notice on some of these tools, there's a little teeny little arrow down in the bottom right hand corner of the tool. That means that if you click and hold, it's going to show you some more tools that are there that are just hidden. We have the type tool and we have the type on a path tool. In InDesign, you're gonna hear me say that all the time. In Illustrator, in Photoshop, in Premiere, because I use so many Adobe programs, and I also teach several Adobe programs. We're gonna talk about this, and you'll see that you'll have more than one tool. The line tool is there, the pen tool, and if we click on that, we have multiple tools underneath that. The pencil tool with multiple pencils. And in here, these next tool, the rectangle frame tool and the rectangle tool, two tools that do exactly the same thing, but they're just slightly different. If anybody knows of the program called Cork Express, when Adobe PageMaker was the thing, Cork was a totally different company, totally different program, and all they did was Cork Express. This is software that another company made, and people were starting to use Cork like crazy because InDesign was a good program. I'm sorry, PageMaker was a good program, but it got a little heavy and really hard to use, and not really hard to use, but it crashed all the time, and we used to call it Adobe RageMaker instead of PageMaker. And this right here, the frame tool, was something that you had to use in Cork, and Cork people were very comfortable with it. So when Adobe redid from the ground up, which thank God they did, they created this tool so that people that wanted to convert from Cork to InDesign, it was a very smooth transition. We have the scissors tool, we have the free transform tool, the gradient swatch tool, the gradient feather tool, the notes tool, the color theme tool, or if you click and hold, you have the eyedropper and the measure tool. We have the hand tool, the zoom tool. Oh, to zoom in, out, we can also, instead of the plus and minus or the up, using the up in here to view and zoom in, zoom out. If we want, we can take the zoom tool and we can click and drag, or click, 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 and it will zoom us in. If we hold the Alt or Option key and get the minus sign, it will zoom us out. I'm going to just go and hit a Command 0 and drop me back to that tool, back to 0 at 100, fit and page, so that we can see what's going on here. So let me create something. Let me draw a frame with the frame tool, and we have created a frame. So now with the frame tool, if I click on the properties inspector, you can see the different things that are going on here. In Adobe InDesign, everything we create in Adobe InDesign will be a vector shape, unless we bring something in from another program, and then it can be raster images like Photoshop images or photos, or if we bring in Adobe Illustrator stuff, that would be a vector shape or a vector image. And there's a big difference between the two, raster and vector, and we'll talk about them in just a minute. But here, I can now grab this tool, I can grab my selection tool, and I can size it, pull it, whatever I want, and it will size that way. Now, if I grab the rectangle tool and not the rectangle frame tool, you can see that basically the two differences between the two things that I created is the frame has a shape, an X in the shape, and when I click on it, notice when I click on it over here in my properties panel, there is no fill, there is no stroke because they both have the no smoking symbol through them. But notice when I click on this right in the middle of it, it selects. If I come down here and click in the middle of this, it will not select it, but if I click right on the line, it will not select it. It has a stroke and fill of none. So these two shapes are identical except for the fact that there is a cross through it. This is one of the advantages of creating things with the frame tool. If I click without a fill or a stroke on it, it will select it because it says, oh, the whole thing is an object for me. If I come over here and click and not find anything, once I do a fill, if I click and had a fill of, let's say, black, and I deselect, now if I click in the middle of it, it will select because there is something filling that shape. Remember, everything is a fill or a stroke when we create it here in InDesign. Even though there is no stroke on this right now, it's still a shape. But we can come in here and we can put a stroke on that. And let's make it big so you can see it. So now, when I click on it, it shows me that it has a stroke of 8 point with a red stroke and no fill. If I click on this, it has a black fill, no stroke, and there is no stroke width on that. So right off the bat, when we start doing stuff, when we talked about this property inspector in getting the lay of the land and our how to get around, now you can see this becomes important because we can start to see the things that are going on here. And also, the first tool in our toolbar is our selection tool, which selects things, moves things, and we get to do that. Okay?